The moment Alex picked up that binder, I knew exactly how this was going to end. He held it between his thumb and forefinger like it carried some kind of contamination, tilted his head with that condescending half-smile, and let it fall straight into the blue recycling bin beside the conference table. The thud echoed in the room louder than it should have. "We don't need this anymore," he announced, loud enough for the interns in the back to hear. "We've got software now." 17 years. That binder contained every protocol I had refined through sweat-soaked shifts, midnight emergency drills, and those heart-stopping moments when a single misstep could have turned our chemical processing plant into a headline. I had built those checklists page by page: ventilation override procedures, hazardous waste disposal chains, calibration verification steps for every sensor on lines A through D. Each page carried handwritten initials, timestamps, and cross-references that had saved us more than once from disasters the software could never anticipate. I sat there in the operations meeting at Summit Chemical Works, just outside Chicago, feeling the weight of every late night I'd spent updating those logs after a CO2 sensor false positive or a pressure valve anomaly. Alex, fresh from a 2-year stint at some overhyped startup that folded right after his departure, had been brought in 6 months earlier to modernize compliance. He spoke in bullet points and KPIs, called my work analog clutter, and promised real-time dashboards, cloud integration, and automated verifications would make everything faster, safer, proactive. I offered to help transition everything. I can digitize the critical checklists, run parallel logs during testing, make sure nothing falls through the cracks, I said calmly. I didn't want credit. I wanted accuracy. Alex barely looked up from his tablet demo. "No need, Malcolm. The system handles it." That was when I realized this wasn't really about safety. It was about optics, shiny presentations for corporate, impressive metrics for the board. I had seen this pattern before in nearly 2 decades of compliance work. After the meeting, I walked back to my office in silence, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like they always did on second shift. I flagged the upcoming random federal safety audit in the internal scheduling tool. I still had legacy admin rights from when we integrated the first compliance software years ago. I advanced the inspection window by 3 months. Not sabotage, just reality arriving ahead of schedule. You know that feeling when you've watched enough cycles to recognize the storm clouds forming? It's not paranoia, it's pattern recognition earned through hard lessons. I spent the next weeks observing quietly. The team transitioned to tablets and QR code scans almost overnight. Binders were shredded. Laminated evacuation maps came down, replaced by flat screens cycling company slogans about being agile and proactive. Alex strutted through the facility, pointing at green bars and animated checkmarks like they were trophies. During one weekly briefing, I raised my hand after he spoke for nearly an hour about reducing procedural lag by over 60%. "Just a reminder," I said evenly. "OSHA process safety management still requires documented human verification and chain of custody sign-offs for hazardous materials." He didn't even glance my way. "It's all baked in. Trust the system." The room stayed quiet. I became the ghost in the meetings, the old-school guy who couldn't adapt to innovation. I watched younger shift leads get corrected for adding secondary signatures on critical valve inspections. "Redundant," Alex snapped. "The software auto-verifies thresholds." One bright technician looked my way, confused. I met her eyes briefly and gave the slightest nod. She understood. Within days, people scanned, tapped, and moved on without reading. Maintenance logs thinned out. Disposal forms became auto-filled drop-downs with no handwritten notes. No personal accountability. The cracks started showing almost immediately, but only if you knew where to look. Missing timestamps on purge cycles. Unchecked overrides that the old protocols would have flagged with physical confirmation. Alex celebrated the efficiency gains, unaware or unwilling to see that documentation and human oversight had quietly disappeared. I kept my mouth shut, smiled, and nodded as required. But I brought the binder with me to every key meeting, a quiet act of remembrance. Friday morning arrived with the usual stale coffee and cold fluorescent hum. The walk-through was supposed to be routine, but I already knew the script. Alex would turn it into another self-congratulatory monologue. I opened the binder to the ventilation override protocol, the exact steps that had prevented a pressure breach last year when a calibration glitch nearly vented toxic vapors. I slid it across the table toward him, letting him see the tabs, signatures, timestamps. He looked at it like I'd handed him a relic from the past. Then, with exaggerated sigh, he picked it up between two fingers and dropped it into the recycling bin again. "We don't need your checklists anymore," he said, voice carrying. "We have software now." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the room, mostly from the newer engineers. I didn't flinch. I simply unclipped my badge, the one I'd worn for 17 years, and slid it across the table next to his coffee. No speech. No drama. I stood, walked out, boots echoing on the concrete floors. The security gate clicked shut behind me, the reader blinking red for the first time in nearly 2 decades. The air outside felt sharp, almost cleansing. Nobody followed. Nobody called after me. By Monday, when HR finally noticed I hadn't logged in, it was already too late. The system pinged a compliance alert at 11:37 a.m., but they had no idea what was coming. 17 years doesn't just disappear overnight. I spent that first weekend at home in my quiet suburban house outside Chicago, reflecting on how I built those protocols from scratch. My wife noticed my silence over dinner. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. But inside, memories played like a film reel. I remembered my first year at Summit Chemical, fresh out of the certification program, learning the hard way during a surprise drill when a secondary containment seal failed under pressure. That incident led to the first detailed checklist I created, step-by-step verification for every seal and valve, signed by 2 technicians. Over the years, I added layers, chain of custody forms for reactive chemicals that prevented mislabeled drums from being stored near heat sources, calibration logs that caught sensor drift before it caused a breach, disposal protocols requiring physical confirmation because software alone can't smell a mislabeled container or notice a technician's hesitation. There were close calls that justified every page. One night in 2018, a CO2 sensor tripped falsely during a late shift. The binder's override protocol guided us through manual verification that revealed a wiring issue before it escalated into a full shutdown. Inspectors praised our documentation. OSHA even referenced our chain of custody logs as a model. Those weren't just papers. They were proof that someone had been present, eyes on the equipment, judgment applied in real time. Alex arrived 6 months ago like a storm of buzzwords. "Legacy systems are holding us back," he declared in his first all-hands. He pushed tablets, QR codes, one-click sign-offs. I tried to bridge the gap privately. In his office, surrounded by monitors showing colorful dashboards, I laid out the risks. Digital is great for trends, but regulations still demand verifiable human oversight for hazardous processes. One glitch, one deleted log, and we're exposed. He waved it off. The platform has redundancies, alerts, full sensor coverage. We're moving into the 2020s. Malcolm. The team felt the shift. Interns laughed at the old laminated wall charts before they were replaced. Shift leads started skipping thorough reads because acknowledge and proceed became the mantra. I watched one young supervisor log incomplete maintenance without noticing because the drop-down auto-filled. When I gently pointed it out later, she whispered, "Alex said it's fine as long as the green bar shows." I started preparing quietly. Using my lingering admin rights, I adjusted the audit trigger, not out of spite, but because I knew the system's weaknesses would be exposed eventually. Better now, controlled, than during a real emergency. Meanwhile, Alex preached automation like gospel. Why 4 eyes when one skin does it? He asked in briefings. I wanted to say those 4 eyes catch the mislabeled methylene chloride drum, remember the pattern of incomplete forms, actually care about the people downstream. But I stayed silent. The rules of the new culture clear. Smile. Nod. Don't resist progress. The final meeting crystallized everything. I brought the binder one last time. Open to the critical ventilation protocol that had saved us the previous year. The timestamps and signatures were right there. Proof of care. Alex's theatrical sigh. The 2-finger drop into the bin. The laughter from those too afraid to speak up. I left my badge without a word. Driving home, the weight lifted slightly, replaced by a cold certainty about what would follow. That Monday, the audit alert hit exactly as scheduled. Alex dismissed it casually. Systems are live. Let them come. He had no idea the date had been advanced. No idea the change logs went unread because paper trails were gone. He prepared flashy charts, confident the dashboards would impress. He didn't realize the platform tracked checkboxes, not certified individuals. And I was the last remaining certified signer for multiple critical hazardous disposal and override steps. Tuesday morning, the federal inspectors arrived without warning, boots on the ground, clipboards in hand, the kind of presence that drops the temperature in every break room. Alex greeted them in his tan blazer and polished shoes. All confidence and smiles. We'll show you how efficient we've become, he told the team beforehand. The lead auditor, a calm gray-haired man who had clearly seen every evasion tactic, laid out the standard protocol. Start with basic verifications. Work backward. The dashboard looked pristine, green lights, auto-generated reports, animated metrics dancing across the screen. Alex narrated smoothly. Live disposal metrics, real-time calibrations, sensor-linked alerts. The auditors nodded politely, then asked for documentation on 3 specific chemical disposal events from the previous weeks. Alex clicked through the portal confidently. The screen blinked. Blank fields appeared where technician verifications and timestamps should have been. No names. No signatures. Huh. Must be a migration delay, Alex said quickly, glancing toward IT. The young tech looked pale. The auditors didn't press immediately, but noted it quietly. They moved to chain of custody logs. Entry stopped abruptly after the day I left. When asked who was certified to sign off, Alex pulled up permissions, 2 accounts grayed out. 1 pending. Mine flagged inactive. We've been transitioning to an integrated approach, he explained. Sweat beginning to show. Less redundancy. More real-time tracking. The lead auditor raised an eyebrow. And who reviewed the override authorizations for last week's Level 2 disposal? Alex faltered. The system logs them automatically. The inspector's voice stayed even. Federal requirements mandate human signatures at 3 checkpoints for hazardous disposal. Software logs alone don't constitute verification. The room grew heavy. Alex tried spinning redundancies and sensor coverage. The auditor acknowledged their usefulness, but emphasized they weren't oversight. Then came the calibration records. Sensors logged activity, but no sign confirmation of completion, the step I had always handled in ink. The lead inspector reached into his leather folder and placed a printed photo on the table, a page from one of my old checklists. Initials aligned neatly. Signatures in blue ink at the bottom, my handwriting sharp and unmistakable from years of documentation. Whose signature is this? He asked quietly. Silence. Alex stared, mouth slightly open. Your system doesn't have any, the inspector noted. The weight settled fully then. Digital checkboxes couldn't stand in court. Timestamps without a responsible person behind them were ghosts. Alex's gleaming platform lacked a single verifiable human signature for weeks. The quiet in the room was absolute, colder than any drill I'd run. Later accounts filtered back through former colleagues. Alex tried framing it as transitional oversight, legacy logs not fully ported, compliance in flux, corporate language to downplay the fire. But that single photo made it devastatingly clear the old way wasn't obsolete. It was the insurance policy they had discarded. The audit report landed like a precise surgical strike for violations, 3 directly tied to processes I had overseen. Improper verification of hazardous disposal, missing chain of custody for reactive chemicals, failure to record calibration confirmations. The inspector's note recommended reinstating supervisory signature protocols. Translation: software alone wasn't enough. Word spread fast through legal channels. The company's insurance provider reviewed the findings and invoked the clause requiring continuous certified safety documentation, specifically, verifiable signatures. Coverage invalidated retroactively. Without those checklists, any incident from recent weeks would leave Summit fully exposed, no safety net. I heard about the scramble, pacing in boardrooms, urgent calls, sweating through explanations. All the efficiency Alex had boasted about now read as negligence, a paperless system with no accountability fallback. Then my phone buzzed. It was the VP of Safety Systems at North Star Industries, a larger competitor across the state line. They had followed the audit fallout, seen my name and signature referenced in agency notes. Your methods prevented a potential catastrophic shutdown, the VP said during the call. We'd rather not learn the hard way. Full autonomy. Competitive package. Respect for proven protocols. I negotiated my start date calmly. No gloating needed. My absence had spoken louder than any confrontation could. Meanwhile, Alex viewed my LinkedIn profile, then sent a connection request with no message. I left it pending. Small whispers came from old contacts. Alex was transitioned out, corporate speak for quietly removed due to elevated compliance risk. No public firing. Just erasure by silence. At North Star, they onboard me publicly, press release, website feature, internal announcements with my photo and a quote I had given offhand. Accountability isn't paperwork. It's memory written in ink. They tasked me with rewriting their compliance framework from the ground up, durable, verified, human-centered. No flashy dashboards required, just real signatures and systems that remembered what others preferred to forget. A rainy Tuesday brought the final image via text from a former colleague, a photo of Summit's new training room. Beside the wall-mounted TV stood a laminated poster titled, Hayes Protocol Checklist Integrity Standard. It was my original format reproduced exactly, color-coded by risk level. Initials column aligned. Red tab alerts in the same positions. Every section header and sub-item matching my handwritten versions line by line. They had copied and mounted what they once mocked, hanging it like sacred text. The same protocols Alex had dismissed as obsolete now served as the company's training cornerstone. The binder he dropped into recycling had outlasted his software promises. I never accepted or declined his connection request. It sat there as a quiet reminder. The wall poster said everything needed, when people pretend signatures don't matter. When blue ink is treated as optional. The system works until the irreplaceable human element is removed. Then reality arrives, audits, liabilities, quiet reckonings. North Star thrived under the balanced approach I helped implement. Summit quietly rebuilt redundancies, but the damage to reputation and coverage lingered. Alex's profile froze, no updates. Slowly fading. Sitting in my new office, looking out at the Midwest landscape, I felt no glee, no revenge, just a cold, Earned completeness. The story wasn't about me or the binder. It was about what happens when innovation discards accountability, when dashboards replace judgment, when memory in ink is undervalued until it's gone. That blue ink still does its job, outlasting software updates, outliving titles, exposing every smug remark about legacy clutter. Funny how the system functioned perfectly until the one non-digital part was taken away. Now it has a name, a role, and a permanent place where people finally understand why it always mattered.